I want to talk about Native America. That is to say, not just Native Americans, but the world that they created and lived in. The original topic of this project was Native American cities. First, it was going to be about Cahokia, just across the Mississippi River from modern day St. Louis. Then, we included Tenochtitlan, which has developed into modern day Mexico City. Then it was Chaco Canyon, northeast of Albuquerque. After that, it was Teotihuacan, Tikal, Palenque, La Venta, Tres Zapotes, Taos Pueblo, Mesa Verde, Watson Brake, Poverty Point, Moundville, Spiro, and there were so many others. That wasn't the way to go. So we began thinking of these cities within the cultural lineages that they were constructed in. We dove headfirst into the overlapping and intertwining civilizations of Mesoamerica, the eastern woodlands, the Southwest, and more. The only answers that we got led to more questions. How did the Olmec give way to the Maya? And then when did the Mixtec, Aztec, and Zapotec come from? How did the Adena culture give way to the Hopewell, then the Mississippian, then the Calusas? We wanted to know why some people believed that the Puebloan, Mogollon, and Hohokam people migrated from Mesoamerica, and others refuted it. Eventually, it became a matter of migration. It may be possible that all stories about human beings on Earth are really about migration. This project was supposed to be something simple, but instead we found 12,000 years of continental history that is rarely taught in modern North American schools. So, maybe the best thing to do is to start as near to the beginning as we can. Going this far into the past is tricky. You can only know the truth about something so far back before it all dissolves into myth, memory, and artifact. After a certain point, the study of history mutates into the field of anthropology, archaeology, geology, and even the yawn-inducing garbage of paleontology and glaciology. What good does all that study do if we can't answer a simple question? How and when did ancient humans come to North America? For the past century, students of these fields have been peering further and further into prehistoric North America in search of an answer to that question. There are some things that almost everyone agrees on, and new things are being discovered all the time. For instance, in 1926, a crew from the Colorado Museum of Natural History excavated the remains of an ancient bison near Folsom, New Mexico. They were surprised to find a very specific type of spear point embedded in the creature and determined that it had been used by ancient humans some 10,000 years prior. We began referring to these types of artifacts as Folsom points, and the people who made them as the Folsom culture. Just 4 years later, in 1930, similar points were found near Clovis, New Mexico, and Dent, Colorado. This time, they were embedded in mammoth skeletons. It wasn't until the invention of radiocarbon dating in the 1950s that we learned that these artifacts, now called Clovis points, dated a whopping 12,000 years old. Eventually, we began to find Clovis points all over North America and as far south as Venezuela and Baja California. This was clearly the first major migration into the Americas, with over 80% of all modern Native Americans descending from these Clovis peoples. From their artifacts, we know that instead of building settlements, they were busy hunting huge animals like mammoths, giant sloths, ancient bison, and giant armadillos. When the last ice age ended, we know that they were forced to adapt and evolve into different cultures as those megafauna went extinct. But if they were the first identifiable group in the Americas, where did they come from? There are many theories. The most popular being the Clovis first theory. Alright, so that one has it that the Clovis people were the first on the continent and that they were badass ancient Asians that hauled ass across Beringia and either down an ice-free corridor that cut through what is now Canada or in boats along the shore of what is now California. This model was taught in schools across North America since the 1970s, but recently research has begun to poke holes in it. While migration along the ice-free corridor almost certainly occurred during later waves of Athapscan and Inuit migration, it would have been covered in glacial ice until after Clovis starts to show up in the record. As for the boat theory, any evidence of coastal settlements were swept away when sea levels rose at the end of the last ice age. In this gap, there's arisen a new generation of models that range from intriguing to nonsensical. They include long-range boat travel across Pacific Ocean currents from Japan, Australia, and Hawaii, and the Sultrian hypothesis that has ancient Europeans making hunting expeditions across sea ice and following routes that thousands of years later would bring Vikings to North America. And that isn't all. There's another debate. Since the early 2000s, archaeologists have begun discovering remains across North and South America that predate the Clovis complex by thousands of years. So, while it may be difficult to pin down who, how, and when the first humans arrived, we know that the Clovis people were flourishing here 12,000 years ago. And for the next 6,000 years, the archaeological record shows the Clovis people multiplying, migrating, and making huge strides in arrowhead technology. Meanwhile, on the other side of the planet, the first ancient Middle Eastern cities began to form. In 6500 BCE, there's Jericho. Around 4500 BCE, Uruk in modern-day Iraq, and in 4000 BCE, the Babylonian city of Ur. Finally, in 3500 BCE, we find one of the earliest Native American settlements. It was a collection of man-made hills that today we call Watson Brake.